The night bled quiet across the plains, broken only by the wind rattling through the half-rotten boards of the Crowley barn. A lantern swung from a rusty nail, casting long, trembling shadows across the dirt floor. Clara knelt in the dust, wrists bound raw by coarse rope. Her dress clung to her like a torn flag after battle. She was only 20, her eyes too young for the bruises blooming across her cheek. Bootsteps crunched behind her. Jed Crowley smelled of whiskey and sweat, the kind that had soaked into his skin for decades. His voice carried the weight of hate sharpened by failure. "You think you're better than me, girl?" His words slurred, ugly. "Your mama thought so too. And look where she ended up." Clara flinched but didn't answer. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Jed grabbed her by the chin, forcing her face up into the lantern light. "You look at me when I talk to you." His palm cracked across her cheek, a sound like a board splitting. Clara's head snapped to the side. A tear cut through the dust on her face, but her jaw stayed tight. "You're nothing," he spat, tossing her down again. The rope dug deeper into her wrists as she hit the ground. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees like the whole desert pitied her. Jed staggered toward the door, shoulders filling the frame as he paused. "No man's coming for you, girl. Not out here." He kicked the door open. Hinges screamed. Night swallowed him whole. Clara lay there, chest heaving, eyes on the splintered rafters above. Her breath hitched once, then again, until it came out as a whisper the wind barely caught. "God, help me." The lantern flickered, struggling in the draft. Somewhere far off, thunder grumbled over the canyon. The camera of the night seemed to pull back slow through the doorway, over the dark yard where the horses shifted uneasy in their stalls, up toward the black sky ready to breathe. Key. And in that moment, with nothing but the storm coming, Clara's fate hung by the frayed thread of hope she refused to let go. The desert stretched black and empty under a sliver of moon, the wind carrying the cold like a blade. Jed Crowley rode slow, his horse's hooves dull thuds on the hard-packed earth. Behind him, tied to the saddle horn by a length of rough rope, Clara stumbled barefoot over the stones. Her dress was torn, her hands bound tight. Each step left a smear of blood in the dust. Jed didn't look back. He just drank from the bottle swinging at his hip and spat into the wind. At the edge of the canyon, he reined in. The horse snorted, steam rising in the frigid air. Jed turned, eyes glinting under the hat brim. "This," he growled, yanking her forward, "is where folks disappear." Clara met his stare. Her lips trembled, but her eyes didn't break. Jed smirked. "Just like your mama." With a shove, he sent her sprawling into the dirt. The rope snapped off the saddle horn and coiled beside her like a dead snake. She hit hard, breath knocking out of her, stones cutting into her knees. The canyon wind howled low like it was warning her what waited if she didn't get up. Jed swung back onto his horse. "No one coming for you," he said, voice flat now like a verdict. "Not out here." Then he turned the horse and rode off, hooves fading into the night. Clara lay there shivering. The cold ate through her thin dress. Her wrists burned from the rope. She clawed at the knots until her fingers bled, but the rope only bit deeper. A coyote's cry rose somewhere beyond the ridge. She froze, chest heaving, eyes scanning the dark. The moonlight caught on the small silver locket at her neck, her mother's. The only piece of her past left untouched. It gleamed faintly like it carried its own light. Her strength finally gave out. Clara slumped against a rock, whispering through chaw-pid lips, "Please, somebody." The night gave no answer. Until hooves, distant, steady. A lone rider cut across the moonlit ridge, his silhouette tall in the saddle, moving toward her through the cold and the dust. The rider came slow out of the dark, the moon behind him, hat brim low. Clara tried to lift her head, but her strength was gone. The wind caught his long coat as he dismounted, boots sinking into the sand with heavy finality. He knelt beside her, calloused hands working quick at the ropes around her wrists. "You're safe now, miss." His voice was gravel, low, steady, the kind a man gets from too many winters alone. Ain't nobody hurting you tonight." Clara's lips trembled. Who are you?" "Name's Samuel Holt," he said, slipping off his coat and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Rancher. Just happened to be riding through." She clung to the warmth, shivering as he lifted her onto his horse like she weighed nothing at all. The ride back was silent except for the wind and the creak of leather. The desert stretched endless, but Samuel's arms stayed firm around her as the horse carried them toward the faint glow of lantern light in the distance. The cabin waited on the edge of his ranch, small but solid, smoke curling from the chimney. Samuel carried her inside, boots thudding on the wood floor, setting her near the fire where heat wrapped her in gold. She winced as he cleaned the cuts on her wrists. "Sorry," he muttered, voice softer now. Clara studied him through the firelight. The man looked carved from stone, grizzled beard, lines in his face like the desert itself had drawn them there, but his eyes, they held something gentler. You didn't have to stop," she whispered. Samuel stared into the fire, jaw tight. "Saw a girl left in the dirt. I stop for things like that." The flames cracked, filling the silence between them. She pulled his coat tighter around herself, the smell of horses and pine smoke clinging to it. "Thank you," she said, barely more than a breath. Samuel nodded once, as if thanks didn't belong to men like him. Outside, the wind pressed against the cabin walls, but inside, for the first time in a long time, Clara felt the cold start to lift. Dawn spilled thin over the hills, painting the ranch in gray and gold. The wind carried the smell of dust and mesquite through the open barn doors. Samuel was tightening the saddle straps when he heard it. Hoofbeats, more than one set. He stepped out into the yard. 3 riders came slow up the trail, rifles glinting in the rising sun. Jed Crowley rode in front, whiskey grin twisting under his hat brim. Clara froze on the porch, Samuel's coat still wrapped around her shoulders. Jed reined in his horse. "Mornin', Holt," he said, voice lazy but eyes mean. "I reckon you got something of mine." Samuel rested a hand on the shotgun leaning against the post. "She ain't yours." Jed chuckled, spit dark into the dirt. "She's my stepdaughter. Law says she comes home." "Law?" Samuel's voice was flat, steady. "You break it every time you draw breath." One of the outlaws shifted in the saddle, eyes darting toward Clara like a hungry coyote. Samuel moved then, slow, deliberate, lifting the shotgun so the barrel caught the sun. "You boys riding off, or riding dead?" The yard went still. Even the wind seemed to wait. Jed's smirk faltered, just a flicker. He leaned in the saddle, spit again. "This ain't over," he growled. "Not by a long mile." Samuel didn't blink. "Then ride. Before it is." For a moment nobody moved. Horses stamped, dust rising around their legs. Then Jed jerked the reins. The 3 riders turned, boots creaking in their stirrups, retreating slow back down the trail. Clara gripped the porch rail so tight her knuckles whitened. Samuel watched until they were specks against the hills, then lowered the shotgun, eyes hard as stone. Clara whispered, "I'll come back." Samuel nodded once. "I know." The wind shifted through the yard, carrying the promise of trouble yet to come. Samuel rode into town with Clara, the morning sun low on the horizon, painting everything in gold and shadow. The streets were empty except for the occasional tumbleweed rolling across the dirt road. The sheriff's office sat at the end of Main Street, its wooden sign creaking in the breeze. Samuel led Clara inside, boots thudding against the worn floorboards. The air smelled of tobacco, old wood, and ink. Sheriff Amos McGraw looked up from behind his desk, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. He was a man shaped by law and loss, lines carved deep in his face from years of keeping the peace in a cruel land. Samuel cleared his throat. "Sheriff, this is Clara. Her stepfather's been..." hurting her. Needs protection. Clara's voice was small but steady. He tried to leave me in the canyon. I can't go back. Sheriff Amos leaned back, studying her, the room silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Finally he nodded. You did right, miss. Ain't no one should suffer like that. I'll see it stopped. Clara's eyes filled with hope, fragile as dawn. She glanced at Samuel, whose jaw was tight, eyes flicking toward the window as if expecting trouble to ride in any second. The sheriff scribbled in a ledger, calling deputies to prepare a warrant. Jed Crowley won't trouble you again, not while I'm sheriff. Outside, the town stirred to life. Horses neighed in their stalls, doors creaked open, and a breeze carried the smell of fresh bread and dust. Yet, beneath the ordinary morning, tension lingered, thick and unbroken. Clara sat on a chair, hands still shaking, the rope burns stinging. Samuel moved quietly to the corner, loading his rifle, vigilant, silent. You saved me," she whispered. "I couldn't leave you out there," Samuel replied. His voice was low, steady. "Not after what he did." Clara nodded, finally letting herself lean back, feeling the warmth of the sheriff's office, the security of law, and the quiet promise of justice. For the first time since Jed's betrayal, the horizon didn't feel like a wall closing in. It stretched wide, a road open to hope. Sheriff Amos stood, tipping his hat. "We'll handle him. Don't worry, miss. Law may ride slow, but it rides sure." Clara's eyes glimmered, a small spark igniting in the ashes of fear, and somewhere, far off, the desert wind whispered that the fight was far from over, but this chapter had been won. Night fell like a heavy curtain over the Holt Ranch, the desert stretching black and silent except for the whisper of wind through mesquite and the low snort of horses in their stalls. The fire in the cabin crackled, throwing shadows that danced across the wooden walls. Clara sat near it, knees pulled to her chest, hands still tender from the rope burns, eyes wide and watchful. Outside, the distant crunch of hooves broke the silence. Samuel's gaze snapped toward the door. He moved like a shadow himself, rifle in hand, eyes hard as flint. Torches appeared first, faint orange flickers in the black. Then more hooves, snorting, stamping, kicking up dust that glinted under the moon. Jed Crowley had returned, and he wasn't alone. Samuel whispered, "Clara, stay low. Don't make a sound." Clara nodded, heart hammering against her ribs. She clutched her silver locket, a lifeline to hope, as Jed and his gang rode closer, faces twisted in malice. They dismounted, surrounding the cabin, torches held high, rifles ready. Jed stepped forward, eyes catching the firelight, grin cruel and drunk. "You thought you could hide her?" he spat. "She's mine." Samuel stepped into the doorway, shotgun leveled. "Not tonight. Not ever again." The wind carried the scent of smoke and fear. Bullets shattered the silence, splintering wood, sending sparks from the cabin's hearth. Clara ducked low, praying, the firelight flickering across her tear-streaked face. Jed lunged through the doorway, torch raised. Samuel fired, and the outlaws' gang scattered, yells lost in the night as horses reared and stamped. The cabin shook under the chaos, shadows of desperation flickering on walls. Clara screamed, her voice raw, as Jed advanced, his eyes blazing with hatred. Samuel met him, chest to chest, rifle pressed firm. The world narrowed to the flash of gunfire, the smell of smoke, and the pounding of two hearts, one for vengeance, one for survival. And then, a pause. The gang faltered. Jed's grin faltered. The wind carried a distant sound, hoofbeats, faster, steadier, law approaching. Samuel's eyes never left Jed's. "This ends tonight," he growled, voice low like a promise carved in stone. Clara's hands tightened around her locket. Outside, the desert waited, dark and wide, as the night storm prepared to break, and the first glimpse of salvation drew near. The stillness of the desert night shattered under the thunder of hooves. In the distance, the sheriff and his deputies rode hard, boots striking stirrups, dust trailing behind like smoke from a cannon. Inside the Holt cabin, Samuel kept his rifle steady, eyes scanning the shadows as Jed Crowley's gang pressed closer. The torchlight flickered, illuminating fear and fury in equal measure. "You'll never take her," Jed bellowed, voice raw, teeth bared. Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger. "Try me." The first shots cracked through the night. Bullets tore into the air, splintering wood, setting the cabin ablaze with sparks. Clara crouched low, heart hammering, silver locket clutched tight as smoke stung her eyes. From the ridge, Sheriff Amos McGraw's voice rang out over the chaos. "Halt! In the name of the law!" The gang froze, their bravado flickering like dying flames. Samuel fired a precise shot, and one outlaw went down howling. The others scrambled, panic ripping through them, as horses reared, hooves kicking dust into the night sky. Jed, wild-eyed and desperate, lunged toward Clara. His torch flared high, casting grotesque shadows across the cabin walls. Samuel stepped in front, rifle steady, chest squared. "This ends now," Samuel growled, eyes locked on Jed's. From the ridge, deputies swarmed in, rifles raised, voices shouting commands. Jed's gang, cornered and outnumbered, faltered. Horses stamped, riders cursing as they were rounded up one by one. Jed stumbled backward, bleeding, desperation etched into every line of his face. The sheriff dismounted, boots crunching on the sand, handcuffs in one hand, authority in the other. "You're under arrest, Jed Crowley," Amos said, voice cold but fair. "No more hurting anyone." Clara's knees shook as she watched Samuel keep a protective hand near her, his chest heaving with relief and exhaustion. The desert wind carried the echoes of the struggle away, leaving silence in its place. Jed's gang was bound, hauled away by deputies, and the sheriff's calm authority restored order. The moonlight glinted on the handcuffs, the metal heavy with justice. Samuel lowered his rifle, finally allowing himself a deep breath. Clara's hands trembled, but the weight on her shoulders began to lift. Outside, the desert exhaled, dust settling, the horizon wide and forgiving. For the first time in many long nights, Clara felt a flicker of hope, small, fragile, but hers to hold.